Good evening, and it's time for Tamora Pierce's first test. This evening we're doing Chapter 9, and it's actually called Tests. The week's punishment left everyone too worn out to do anything but classwork. Kel knew that was temporary. Joran, Vincent, and another third year named Garvey had not given up their harassment of the first years completely. During the day, they took every chance to bump, casually push, or thump the younger pages. On their first night without linens to scrub, Kel changed from dress to shirt and breeches after supper and went to Neil's room to study as usual. Merrick, Seaver, the prince, Faleron, and Neil himself were there when she came in. Cleon arrived not long after she did. He sat with Neil at the writing desk, talking about a paper the third years had to write for Master Yayan. The room settled into its usual library-like quiet. Everyone whispered to keep from disturbing the others. Kel, Seaver, and Merrick worked on the day's mathematics problems together for a while. When Kel knew that she wouldn't be needed right away, she rose and stretched. Then she casually walked out of the room. Neil followed her and closed the door behind him. "I'd like a word," he said. Kel looked at him. "I'll be right back," she began. "You're not fooling me, you know," he informed her. "Every night you put on a dress for supper. That's to remind us you're a girl and you're not ashamed of it. Fine. I understand perfectly. But some nights, when you don't have punishment work and Jordan and his pack are being rowdy, you go and change into your fight clothes." He waved at her shirt and breeches. "And you take a little walk. Sometimes you come back just fine, and some nights they haul you and whoever you mixed up with before the stump. You go looking for trouble." "Neil," she said nervously, "keep your voice down." "Why? You don't seem to care if you get caught." It was an accusation, but he lowered his voice to say it. His voice turned red with effort. She sighed. "That's not it at all." "Then what is it?" he demanded hotly. "Are you some kind of tavern tough that likes to brawl?" Kel shook her head. "Not hardly, since I lose every time." "Then what is it? I want to know," cried Neil, his voice cracking. "I'm your friend, and what you're doing worries me sick." "This isn't the time or place." "It is if I say it is," he snapped. "I mean it, Kel. I swear by Mithras, if you try to leave, I'll call the servants out myself. I'll tell the stump." He stood between her and the halls as she patrolled, arms akimbo, his green eyes mulish. Kel ran her fingers through her hair. He really would be difficult about it. She knew him well enough to be sure of that, and she wanted someone to know she didn't get into fights because she liked it. "It's that earning your way custom where the older boys make us do their errands. It's stupid and it wastes time. That's bad enough. But what Joran does and his friends, they take it way too far. They use it to bully first years, and that's just plain wrong." He crossed his arms over his chest. "Oh, wonderful. You're on a hero's quest to get rid of bullies." Kel glared at him. "Someone has to! And if this wish of yours is so glorious, why haven't you asked anyone to join you? We're all would-be knights, aren't we? If you aren't just enjoying the fights, why not ask for help?" Kel planted her fists on her hips. "Because I had no reason to think I would get it." "What?" said a startled voice nearby. Kel and Neil turned toward his door. At some point during their argument, the boys inside had eased it open a crack to listen. "Merrick, you dolt!" they heard Faleron say. The door opened wide. They all stood there, even Prince Rold, looking at Neil and trying not to look at Kel. "Well, she as good as said we agree with Jordan and his pack," stammered Merrick. Kel inspected each of them. "None of you ever spoke against it," she replied, picking her words carefully, "even when it was you being picked on." She rested her eyes on Seaver and Merrick. "Once it was over, you didn't say how it wasn't right and ought to be stopped. You just came here to Neil's room to work with the group. I figured I was the only one here who thought it was all wrong. I thought maybe I saw it different because I'm a girl. I could do something about it, but I didn't think you would." Neil turned away, running his fingers through his hair. "Now, wait," protested Cleon. "You can't go setting tradition on its ear. Hazing is the way new boys become pages. They have to earn respect from the older ones, and we teach them to obey our orders." "So I should let this go on because it's always been that way?" she asked. Cleon, the prince, Faleron all nodded. "No," she said flatly. "I know what you mean, Cleon. I do your chores." She met each boy's eyes. but this custom leads to worse things. Cleon sends me for papers, but someone else traps a first year in a corner and keeps making him do stupid tasks. He'll maybe hit the first year to smarten him when the first year slows down, and that is dead wrong. If we take this as pages, what about when we're knights? Do we say, oh, now I'm going to be nice to the weak and the small? Or do we do as we learned when we were pages? She stopped, breathing hard. It was the longest speech she'd ever made. I don't mean to lecture. You can laugh and say I'm a silly girl. But when I see anyone big pick on someone small, well, there's gonna be a fight. She looked at Neil. Jordan and his friends are out there looking for someone to hurt. I want to stop them. They'll beat you up, the prince remarked quietly. I think of it as combat exercise, Kel replied with grim good humor, and I'm learning new ways to do combat all the time. So if we're all finished here? She walked through them and down the hall, turning into the library corridor. Running footsteps approached. She turned to find Neil. Kel stared at him. What do you think you're doing? He looked down at her for a long moment. You're the oldest 10-year-old I've ever met, he said finally. Exasperated, Kel put her fists on her hips. What is that supposed to mean? Neil thrust his hands into the pockets of the breeches he wore at night. It means I'm trying to justify to myself the fact that the best lesson I ever had on chivalry came from someone 5 years younger than me. When you put it that way, well, I guess I better help. Kel shook her head. All right, but it's going to hurt, she said, and set off down the hall. You don't have to tell me that, Neil said, keeping up with her. Don't forget, I see your bruises every day. They heard laughter from the stair leading to the teachers' quarters and ran to investigate. They climbed to the landing between the floor and the teacher's floor to find Joran and Vincent pushing Quintain up and down the steps as Garvey watched. The moment they saw Kel and Neil, they stopped. Quintain made his escape. Kel, Neil, and the 3 senior pages, not wanting to be heard by anyone on the teacher's floor, went cautiously down the stairs. At the bottom, Joran threw a punch at Kel, who ducked. Vincent tackled Neil, who threw him into Garvey. They were in the thick of combat, giving and exchanging blows, when the air seemed to grow as heavy as velvet, weighing their limbs and shoulders down. Suddenly, fighting, or even speech, was an effort. Slowly, the 5 pages looked toward the stair. A tall man, a very tall man, Kel realized, with tousled black hair and large dark eyes stood there, hands braced on either side of the doorframe. He was dressed in a flowing white shirt and black breeches. The sparkle of magic glittered in the air between him and them. Such animosity will not do, he observed in a light voice. You've managed to affect my current working. If it were to go astray, except that it wasn't going to, because you're going to drop this and you're going to do whatever it is pages are supposed to do at this time of night. Run along, please. Although they were dismissed, none of them could move. The man frowned when he saw he wasn't being obeyed. Finally, Neil managed to croak, Spell? Spell? Oh, yes, of course. How careless. The sparkle of magic vanished. Kel and the others could move again. Now you may go. He turned and climbed up the stairs as Joran, Vincent, and Garvey ran. Kel and Neil remained there, staring up the stairs as the man disappeared from view around a turn. Will he report us? Kel asked. If so, she wished he'd do it. She hated waiting for a summons. Neil chuckled. Master Numair? I doubt he'll remember why he left his workroom once he gets back to it. That must have been a sensitive spell, though, if we affected it. Numair, she murmured to herself with a frown. The name sounded familiar. Numair Samelin, replied Neil, only the most powerful mage in the realm. He'll be teaching the magic classes about dragons and griffins in a month or so. He's Dane's, Kel started to say, lover, but didn't when she saw Neil frown. Friend? She supplied hastily. Neil sighed and nodded. He's too old for her. You know. Kel gave him a sympathetic pat on the back as they headed back to the others. They were at Neil's door when he suddenly turned cheerful. At least Joran won't stage any of his little scrabbles near the teacher's quarters again, he pointed out. He's probably thinking right now he's lucky Master Numair didn't turn him into a tree. Oh, as if Master Numair could, retorted Kel. Only in stories did mages turn people into things, and she had noticed such stories always took place in the very distant past. In real life, it was supposed to be impossible. Neil grinned at her. When he's upset enough, he can do pretty much what he wants. He turned an enemy mage into a tree just 2 years ago at Fief Dunlath. Kell gaped. I never heard that. We got all the news in the islands. You're sure? I had it from Father, who had it from the king. Kell shook her head, impressed, and Neil opened his door. Hello, my ducks, he caroled as they walked in. Did you miss us? The next night, when Kell stood to go through the halls, Neil closed his book and stood with her. Phaelon hesitated, then got to his feet, as did Merrick. Seaver was already opening the door. Kell looked at the other boys. Cleon had returned to study with them. His open, direct face was confused. The prince met Kell's gaze and shook his head, a wistful expression in his eyes. Poor Rold, Kell thought. His life would be so much easier if he didn't worry about what people might say. She smiled at him and led the others outside. There was no sign of Joran and his cronies that night, or the next. The third night they found Joran and Vincent in a courtyard, forcing Esmond of Nicoline to do bows made to a monarch over and over. The 2 third years looked up, saw the size of their company, and fled. Neil slung an arm around Esmond's shoulders. Want to join our study group? They had a brisk skirmish with Joran and Vincent the night after their meeting with Esmond. It ended quickly, all of them running when they heard the approach of a group of servants. The night after that, Cleon put his book aside with a sigh as Kell got up. I better come keep you children out of trouble, he said with a grin at the older, taller Neil. Prince Rold and Esmond, who had joined them, stayed to work as Kell and her supporters patrolled the halls. With the addition of Cleon to their group, the fights ended. He and Neil were too big, and the others too many. Joran, Vincent, and their friends decided to find other ways to spend their time until spring. At the end of March, another thaw was followed by a blizzard that laid more than 2 feet of snow on the ground. 3 days later, it had all melted, creating seas of mud everywhere. Planks laid on the mud to provide dry footing sank and disappeared. Weapons and unarmed combat practice were held indoors. When they were done, Lord Wilden demanded their attention. I won't have good horses lame from riding in this if it's not necessary, he told the pages. Instead, we'll go for a run, from one end of the curtain wall to the other. Kell's skin rippled with goosebumps. The wall that cupped the palace in a flattened half-circle was 30 feet high. True, the top was broad enough to allow 5 men to walk abreast, but the thought of being up there made her sweat. I should have known, she thought, trotting up a narrow stair to the top of the wall in Merrick's wake. I was lucky to go for so long without facing this. I should have known it couldn't last, and I'll just have to do it, that's all. Waiting bores me, she heard Wilden roar from the open door above. Get those legs moving! Kell locked her eyes on Merrick's ankles as they ran, gasping, out of the tower. Don't look ahead. Don't look to either side, she ordered herself. Just follow Merrick. Go, Wilden bellowed. Don't wait for permission. I told you to run the wall, so run it. Smell that fresh air. Don't make a face, Queen's Cove. Air is good for you. Breathe it. Stone after stone passed under Kell's nose. Her feet, shod in thin leather slippers, slapped the ground. You run like a lamb, probationer! The boom of Wilden's voice in her ear made her jump. Open your stride. Put some distance between your knees. Plant those feet. Don't touch on your toes and kick up your heels. I hope your precious Yamanis didn't run like this. I'd like to see how you run with a silk kimono wrapped around you from thigh to ankle, Kell thought as she lengthened her stride. The thought of Wilden in Yamani dress made her giggle as her thigh muscles strained, then relaxed, easing into the new way to run. A quick glance ahead told Kell the boys were starting to race. Let them. She was going to stay right behind Merrick's steadily churning feet. Wilden slowed them to a walk, then made them run again. He altered walking and running, never allowing them to come to a complete stop. They were a strong group, hardened by a winter of short runs to the stables and back. This was an easy track, flat and dry, but the length began to tell on them. Keeping her eyes down, Kell moved up until she was between Merrick and Seaver. How's Lord Wilden? She inquired, gasping. Fresh as rosebuds in May, growled Merrick. Don't you two know? Seaver asked. His lordship runs this whole wall both ways every morning before dawn. My cousin says that's how he got the lungs to yell like he does. I hate the stump, Merrick said tightly. He liked Neil's turn for Wilden. As if he cares a Dawkin, Kell remarked. How's Neil? Seaver looked up, scanning the pack of older boys. He's ahead of everybody. Horse blood, guessed Merrick. There must be some in the Queen's Cove family. A racer, agreed Seaver, panting. The family keeps it hushed up. Kell would have laughed, but she was too breathless. She stayed with her 2 friends as they ran to the end of the wall. They stopped at the watchtower that marked an end of the flattened half-circle. "Keep moving!" ordered Weldon, running in place as he watched the pages. "Don't stop, you'll cramp. If you throw up, do it outside the wall. The wind can't blow it back in your face." "Oh, good," gasped Desmond, who looked like he might well vomit. "That's an important tip." "I better not get sick, then," thought Kell. She stubbornly kept her eyes on the walkway as the boys drifted toward the view of the city. She'd heard it was splendid. Weldon had come to a halt. As the pages drew within earshot, he said, "You might one day command an attack on a walled fortress. How would you approach this position? Quintain of Mithras Hill." "I'd go around the back," he said, and smirked as the other pages laughed. "Very true," said Weldon frostily. "With no attacks on this palace in centuries, previous monarchs who wished to expand knocked out the rear wall. We are discussing a hypothetical, Page Quinton, a chance for you to use your imagination. How would you attack, Page Merrick?" "I'd still go around back, my lord," replied Merrick, who had caught his breath. "With the royal forest there, you can get men and catapults and rams really close before you're seen. Here in front, there's all that open ground between us and the temple district." "If you brought an army into that forest, there is a mage king in possession of the Dominion Jewel who will raise the trees and streams to fight you. He has a wild mage who would ask every vole, fox, rat, wolf, owl, and otter to harass your flanks. You would never be seen again," Weldon informed them. "Probationer, how would you attack this wall? You must survey the ground before you reply." Kell stared at Weldon, white-faced. Weldon motioned for her to step up to one of the square notches between the tall stones in the wall. "Before we grow old, probationer." Kell's legs trembled, and not just with the exhaustion from the run. She forced one foot forward, then the next. "I hope you are quicker to advise your lord in a combat situation," Weldon told her. Stone halted her advancing steps. She had reached the wall. Kell took a deep breath and looked out through the opening. Straight ahead, the city was a jeweled blanket on both sides of the Oleron River. It was a very pretty sight. Kell didn't feel as if she was high up, but as if she was looking at a complex tapestry. "Our attackers have overrun the city and put it to the torch, girl," Weldon said overpatiently. Kell heard the other pages snickering. She was taking too long. "How must they come at us?" "It's all right," Kell thought. "This isn't so bad." Then she looked down. Kell's ears roared. She could not catch her breath. The broad moat that passed in front of the wall was a long drop below. She heard nothing, did not feel hands prying her grip from the stone. The fear gripped her as tightly as it had on the day Connell held her over the tower balcony. Her whole body crawled with a weak, paralyzed itch. A clean-shaven face thrust itself before hers. "Look at me, girl," a stern voice ordered. "Nowhere else. Look at my face. Whose face do you see?" Kell blinked. That hideous drop was gone. Replaced. Her eyes darted to red furrows of scar at the corner of his right eye. "Lord Weldon," she croaked. "Exactly. Look at my face and turn with me." His hands on her arms tugged, twisting her body to one side. She had to move her feet or be wrapped around her own spine. She turned, her eyes locked on his. "Now, we're on a flat place. There's stone under your feet. Do you understand? Look down." "I'll fall," she whispered. "You can't. You're on solid ground. Just look. Curse it, fool girl. Do as you're told." Instinctively, they'd all learned to jump for that tone this winter. She looked down. The only thing that she saw was stone. Flat, gray, and wonderfully close. A boy snickered. "Oh, I'll fall," someone squeaked in a falsetto voice. Kell closed her eyes, close to tears with humiliation. Weldon let go of Kell. "All of you! Back to the practice courts," he said. "We've time for a few rounds of staff work." A few boys passed her, giggling. A friendly arm was slung around Kell's shoulders. "Come on, Mindlin," Neil's husky voice murmured in her ear. "We'll get you inside." "But you're not afraid of stairs," Siva remarked. She cleared her throat. "Most are narrow and twisty. You can't see far in either direction. The rest of the time, I'd look at the next step." "You better pray he never makes you climb Balor's Needle," Cleon advised as they entered the tower stairwell close to the page's wing. "He doesn't make us run up there, does he?" Kell squeaked. Balor's Needle was the tallest part of the palace, a lean, high spire with a fragile-looking iron stair that spiraled around its length. The mages used it to observe the stars or to work spells of long seeing that let them view the countryside around the palace and capital. Cleon shook his head. None of us are allowed up there. A page failed the examinations about 6 years ago and jumped off the needle. In silence they finished the walk to the court, where staff practice was held. It surprised none of them that someone might jump to his death after failing the dreaded spring examinations. Not that I'll have to worry, Kel thought dully as she picked up her staff. He knows I'm afraid of heights now. He can say if I'm afraid of heights, I can't keep up with the boys and I'll be out on my ear. By early April, Kel was able to hit the quintain's small shield every time she jousted. Her lance could only take so much of this accuracy. At last it shattered. Taking a buffet from the sandbag, she had yet to strike the small ring on the target, which would cause the bag to swing just halfway around. Kel rode Peach Blossom to the quintain and dismounted, picking up the pieces of her shattered knee out of the mud. "Stop mourning it like it's a dead friend," Wilden said curtly. He'd been short with her since the day on the palace wall. "Go choose another." Joran was ahead of her, picking a lance from the spares and holding it to Kel as she approached. Expressionless, she accepted it, knowing his eagerness to help was just so he could give her another weighted lance. This one felt no lighter than the old one. Kel ran her fingers along it and found the hairline breaks where plugs had been fitted back into the wood. She looked at Joran. He smirked. Something happened to her then. Something she would not be able to explain if she lived to be 1,000. A feeling like cool rain poured over her, making her feel more focused than she'd ever had before. She mounted Peach Blossom. She floated in an empty space, enclosed in glass like one of Master Lintel's animals. Outside the glass, the older boys practiced sword work from horseback as they waited their turns on the quintain. Or they joked or rested, one eye on Sergeant Ezekiel as he corrected Faileron's seat. A single quintain was free, the one assigned to the new pages. Esmond was next, but Lord Wilden was showing him something as the other 33 first-years watched. Unobserved, Kel kneed Peach Blossom into line with the free quintain. She swung her lance into the couched position, its grip firmly in her gloved hand. The butt passed snugly between her ribs and arm. The long tapered end thrust out over the gelding's withers at just the right angle to hit the shield. Gently she kicked Peach Blossom, urging him forward at a trot. Her world narrowed to one small painted circle on a slab of wood. She was halfway down the lane, and everything, her seat, her grip, the heft of the lance, felt perfect in a way it never had before. "Charge!" she whispered to Peach Blossom. She hadn't demanded that speed from him since their first try at the quintain. He lowered his head and charged, hooves thundering on the damp springtime ground. Kel rose to meet the target, her lance aimed at the circle. She struck it dead center. The target snapped to the side, precisely as it did for the 3rd and 4th-year pages, the quintain turning neatly. Kel galloped past, waiting for the bruising impact of the sandbag. It never came. She raised her lance and drew back on the reins, guiding Peach Blossom into a gentle run. She was almost certain that the gelding congratulated her. "Extra oats for you tonight," she murmured, slowing him to a walk. Wilden watched her, arms crossed over his chest. "Good," he said. "When you can do it reliably instead of once or twice, you will have something." Kel didn't hesitate. She knew the feel of it now. She walked Peach Blossom into a turn and pointed him at the target. One of the pages had already set it for the next tilter. Kel tucked her lance butt under her arm, lowered it until it crossed the gelding's shoulder, and urged him into a trot, then a gallop, then a charge. Everything that had been so perfect a few moments ago felt exactly right again. She struck the circle dead center a second time, then went back and did it a third time, and a fourth. After her fifth perfect tilt, she stopped in front of Lord Wilden. "Very good, probationer." Wilden sounded as if his teeth hurt to say it. The other pages had all stopped what they were doing to watch her last 3 passes. "You're released for the remainder of the morning." She bowed to him from the saddle and turned Peach Blossom toward the stables. The sound of applause made her turn in the saddle. "Huzzah, Kel!" Neil cried gleefully. "Huzzah! Huzzah!" The prince, Merrick, Seaver, Faileron, and Cleon were all clapping and cheering. So were Ida Bell, the Shang Wildcat, and Stefan the hostler, who often came to watch the tilting practice. She waved to them with a grin and nudged Peach Blossom to a trot. The examinations at the end of April had existed for only 14 years. King Jonathan's father had introduced them at the discovery that a girl, Alana the Lioness, had concealed her sex to become a knight. The suspicion that trickery was involved had led King Rold to create public tests. Now anyone could watch as a panel of nobles, mages, and teachers asked pages questions about their classwork and watch them show their physical skills in practice bouts of all kinds. Only 3 boys had failed the examinations since they were set up, yet all the pages were convinced that they would be the next. Even the prospect of the lesser examinations, the little tests, which gave younger pages experiences in public questions and performance, made them nervous. Kell dreaded the public exams, but she was beginning to think that this year's tests would be the only ones she would get to take. Lord Wilden would never let her return in the fall. He was as cold to her in April as he'd been in September. He still referred to her as probationer, which seemed like a bad sign. Knowing that, she had to force herself to study for the little tests. The reality was an anticlimax. Their audience was tiny, the classroom questions basic. The pages had to write and do mathematical problems on a large slate so everyone watching could follow their work. They had to recite the Code of Ten, the set of laws that form the basis of government in most realms north of the Inland Sea. They reported aloud on the habits and behaviors of some species of immortal. Kell chose Huruks. Then they demonstrated 3 different ways to greet dignitaries, and that marked the end of the classroom work. Going to the outdoor practice court for their examinations, the first-year pages had to saddle, mount, and ride their horses around a ring. They went through the most basic maneuvers with unarmed combat, staff, wooden practice sword, and bow. Then, to Kell's surprise and relief, it was over. All of the first years passed. I keep telling you, these tests have to be easy enough that even a noble with ogre blood could pass, Neil informed her at supper that night. Kell grinned, but said, ogres only sound stupid. Most are pretty smart. And it's a shallow person who judges anyone by the way they sound, he admitted cheerfully. I'm so shallow, I'm surprised I don't reflect myself. Kell groaned and punched him in the shoulder. The next week, Kell, Neil, and the other pages watched the big tests, in which the 4th-year pages were publicly quizzed and made to demonstrate their mastery of the skills they would need as squires. Kell was surprised that neither Lord Raoul, the knight commander of the King's Own, nor Alana the Lioness as King's champion was among the judges, and mentioned it to Neil. Well, of course, they can't decide on whether or not a page is suitable, Neil replied. None of the knights from that generation are allowed to judge. Quite a few of our stuffier nobles claim the pages and squires in those years collaborated to get the lioness made a knight, though of course no one says as much to their faces. Even Duke Gareth the Elder, her training master, has never served. The king picked the oldest, blue-blooded, fussiest men in the realm to do the tests, ones who were nowhere near the palace for Lady Alana's training. That keeps traditionalists happy, so His Majesty can get them to go along with things like opening schools on their estates. How dare they say the lioness cheated, growled Kell. Great gosh, she fights ogres and spiders and armies all the time. You really look up to her, don't you? Neil asked. She's a hero. She's proved it over and over, and will go on doing so until the day she dies, he said evenly. You can smack some people in the face with a haddock, and they'll still call it a mouse, if a mouse is what they want to see. She's learned to live with that. Perhaps you should too. After a pause, he asked, "Have you ever met her?" "We were away, and now she's had a busy year," whispered Kell, hanging her head. "So busy she hasn't even visited their majesties." He seemed about to say something, but changed his mind. "I want to hear this," he said, as the judges quizzed a page on the law regarding illegal settlement. That night, in the mess hall, the 4th-year pages moved to the half of the room where the squires sat. Everyone applauded. There was cake for dessert, and a juggler, a special treat from Lord Wilden for the new squires. It marked the beginning of a lazy May. Throughout the month, knights drifted in and out of the practice courts, looking at the new squires. Only simple reading assignments were given in afternoon classes. There was no etiquette class. Master Oakbridge was in charge of arranging the monarch's summer travels throughout the realm, and had not a moment to spare. Only in the practice courts was the page's schedule the same. With the arrival of warmer weather, Kell's sparrows had moved back into the courtyard. In May, the babies began to explore the world outside their nests. Kell loved to watch the tiny birds. They approached their parents or Kell with wings aflutter, yellow-rimmed beaks wide open, cheeping plaintively until they were fed. When not hungry, they seemed to view the world with the gravity of aged priests, watching everything around them with great eagerness. Crown's fledglings were every bit as alert as their mother, reaching their seed before all the other youngsters. They were also the first to shed their baby feathers. Kell was able to recognize them only when they begged their mother for extra food. At the beginning of June, the pages began to prepare for their weeks in camp. They were issued summer clothes much like their practice garments, and taught how to load a pack horse with supplies and gear. Their first class of the day for a week was neither reading nor writing, but the art of calculating the amount of supplies necessary to keep 4 adults, Lord Wilden, Sergeant Ezekiel, the Shang horse, and the Shang wildcat, and 20-odd pages for 2 months. Finally, Lord Wilden gave them an entire day to run last-minute errands and lays. They were to leave for the depths of the royal forest in the morning after breakfast. The next morning Kell rose at her usual early time. She gave her sparrows one last feeding. "You stay out of trouble," she ordered them as they pecked at their seed. Selma was to look after them while she was gone. Kell refused to think of who would care for them in the fall. Lord Wilden had still not given any sign that she might be allowed to return. Overhead the great bell clanged, summoning those who were late risers from their beds. Gathering her saddlebags, Kell left her room. There you are. Chapter 9, Tests.